Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ted Alexandro Show. I am your host, Ted Alexandro, coming to you from an undisclosed location in the northeast of these United States of America, where a storm is hitting hard. It's due tonight as I record this. I've salted the meat and the driveway. So everything that needs to be salted is. Those of you who have become familiar with my critically acclaimed weather-related tweets, I released another one today because it's timely and people have come to depend on me for my weather-related content. Those of you who are fans of my comedy, fans of the Ted Alexandro Show, you know that I can dabble in the polarizing, in the divisive, but problem solved, my weather-related tweets have taken off in a way I never could have imagined. People have come to depend on me for their weather-related tweet content, and I deliver, quite honestly. So that was another, anytime there's a weather-related issue, anything, big storms coming, something in me tingles now because I know it's time for a weather-related tweet. So I put one out earlier today, let folks know, what to do, how to prepare, how to dress, etc. Thank you, friends, for tuning in. As always, we ask you to please take a moment, just a moment, it's all it will take, to hit subscribe. Ring that notification bell. Leave a comment. Let us have it. Tell us what you think down below. And of course, like this video. All of these things help the algorithm. And this is an important thing to bring up, folks, because the algorithm is not working in our favor. I don't know if it's because I was arrested at Occupy Wall Street. I don't know. I don't know if it's because of my weather-related tweets. It could be. Whatever the reason, it is clear, and it has been clear, that our channel is being shadow banned. So I am enlisting you, the T-Hive. That's right. You've got a name. The T-Hive or the Thive. Even better. I am enlisting you, if you would. Now, this is not a direct order from your commander. This is merely a plea. Do what you can to share the show. Let friends know. Let folks know. Tweet about it. Put it on your social media. I need the Thive to step up in terms of spreading the gospel. Because, as I say, YouTube and its algorithm is suppressing the show. It is not doing anything to get us to people that might otherwise be interested. It is not doing anything to uplift us in the algorithm. So all you need to know is that the show is not getting as far a reach as it possibly could, thanks to the algorithm and things that have been changed within the algorithm from what I've been told from other comedians with podcasts, specifically those with progressive or left podcasts. And certainly I think this falls into that category. I would call this probably an anti-capitalist comedy podcast. And I know the landscape is so crowded. And I would call myself a bit of a radical leftivist. So, again, if you consider yourself part of the Thive or the T-Hive, I need you, I beseech you, to help spread the word. And you can do that in whatever way you see fit, whatever way has the farthest reach, be that a tweet, a TikTok, a Facebook, or a flare up into the sky, or maybe a prayer. Any and all of the above are welcome, because what are we trying to do here? We're trying to grow the show and get to as many people as possible. Friends, this past week has been all about what? GameStop. Now, if you're like me, all you knew about it prior to this was that it was right next to the Sunglass Hut and Orange Julius at the mall. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about GameStop, and by now, I'm sure you know the broad strokes. That was pretty much all I knew, and more or less all I still know. Although today's guest, hold on to your hat, Alexis Goldstein will be joining us. I met Alexis through Occupy Wall Street. She is a former Wall Street finance worker. She was in the belly of the beast. She worked there for 7 years and lived to tell about it. And in fact, came out on the other side to talk about a lot of the Wall Street corruption. During Occupy Wall Street, I had the good fortune to cross paths with her and see a lot of the talks she was giving, a lot of the information she was spreading about a system that is corrupt, corrosive, broken, and obviously desperately in need of reform. And this past week has done nothing to change that perception. The broad strokes are the way the media's been painting it, and Alexis will address this in just a bit. It's been portrayed as a bit of a David and Goliath type narrative, where the Davids of Reddit, of this subreddit group, Wall Street Bets, I think is the name of it, they collectively started to buy stock in GameStop because hedge funds were betting against it. They were shorting it, is the terminology. Now, please. I don't know anything about stocks, and I'll get to that in just a moment as well. But as I understand it, these hedge funds have been shorting GameStop stock, which means borrowing it and selling it in the hopes of driving the price down, and they profit off of betting against it. That's the kind of short version of shorting. So this is common practice. It's perfectly legal, which goes to show you how bizarre the system is. People bet for things to fail, and then they profit off of the failure of what they are betting on. Now, this ragtag group of Redditors started buying the stock so that rather than the stock tanking, it inflated. And it went from, I believe, $4 to start. It was trading at $4 up to as high as, I think, $400, if not higher than that. So what did that do? The effect of that was that the evil hedge fund billionaires lost a bundle. So it was seen as sort of activism to rally against the hedge funds and to tank their plot to nosedive GameStop. So in fact, it went through the roof, and all of these Redditors kept buying, and then other people kept buying. So the narrative was that David and Goliath, they took out their slingshot and they bought GameStop, and as a result, the hedge fund lost billions. So as I said, Alexis will address that in just a bit, because I'm not the one to do it, folks. As I said at the top, this is an anti-capitalist comedy podcast. I don't believe in money. if you would, please go to patreon.com/TedAlexandro to help support the show. For those of you who do believe in money. But I've long had issues with the stock market, and to me, it's always seemed like an extension of America's battlefield. America, of course, is constantly going to war to extract resources from nations around the world. And in my view, the stock market is an opportunity, or at least the illusion, that you, the little guy, can participate in buying stock in companies that you will never actually see with your eyes in any kind of brick and mortar way. You will not participate. You can turn a blind eye, in essence, if you buy ExxonMobil or Apple or Google or Disney or whatever the blue chip stocks are. Again, the whole bottom third should just constantly be saying, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. In fact, let's put that up every week. But my soul tells me, and again, please don't take financial advice from someone who starts a sentence with those words. My soul tells me that the stock market, A, is corrupt through and through, B, is rigged, C, money isn't real, and D, it's violence. It's violence, because what goes on around the world, you will never know, you will never see, but you will profit off of it. You will profit off of it. You know? Now, you can do your socially conscious funds, and I have in the past, you know, where they vet the fund, they vet the businesses, and they say, oh, no, they're good to their employees, they are good to the world. But come on, the longer you live, the longer you take a look at any company, any business, you know it's a load of shit, and you don't know anyway. It's just to kind of give you a little bit of justification for being a capitalist. So and whatever stock I've had in the past, I've sold it. You know, partially because I needed that money at different times in my life. But also because ideologically, I kept realizing, like, this is icky. This feels like a casino. And I hate Vegas. I hate Atlantic City. I hate Reno. I hate all these places that the economy is built around casinos. So I've always had just a gross feeling. I've had an aversion to the stock market. And I can hear some of you, that's naive. What about your portfolio? What about your financial future? We'll see. This guy is my wealth manager, and we're gonna see how that goes. But for me, it's better for things to square with my ideals, to square with my philosophy. Until things get really bad, and then of course I'll do a 180 and I'll switch. But I am excited to speak with Alexis Goldstein because she knows about these things, and she is from the Occupy movement, so she marries both a vast knowledge of the world of finance with an activist's eye towards critiquing it and looking for solutions. So without further ado, let's welcome to the show my friend and a brilliant mind, Alexis Goldstein. Alexis.
Hi.
My goodness. We're back. Thank you. You're the first person that I can say welcome back to the show on their first appearance. I have to let people know because I was so mortified. You and I did this interview this afternoon, and for whatever reason, I forgot to hit record, and I was just crestfallen. It's such a great interview. I was like, my goodness, that was amazing. I tell my wife, and then I realize I record. I spoke to some friends because I was like, should I, she's a busy person. I found out in the interim, by the way, that just prior to this, you were on Twitch with AOC. So now you're slumming on the Ted Alexandro show, and we don't even press record.
Well, if it makes you feel better, A, I've done this myself before. B, we go way back, right? So I'm gonna show up when you call me, and if it makes you feel any better, AOC had about 30 minutes of audio problems where we all didn't know if it was even going to happen. They had to shut the Twitch down and start it back up. And so you're in good company.
Okay, good. That does make me feel better. And I cannot thank you enough because I truly was crestfallen, and you were kind enough to reschedule. So thank you, Alexis.
Sure. Happy to be here.
So let's jump right in. We were discussing the GameStop phenomenon this week, all of the insanity, and specifically the narrative around it that a lot of people are pushing, this kind of David and Goliath narrative of this ragtag group of Redditors who are taking on the behemoth of the Wall Street hedge funds. But you had a little bit of a different take. Can you talk about your perspective on that?
So my background is I used to work on Wall Street. I was there for 7 years. I quit in 2010. And one of the things that I learned there is whenever there's a ton of market activity, and especially when there's a lot of volatility, and what that means is when the price goes up and down and it's like moving around really fast, the people that I used to work with on the trading desk made a killing. Like those were their favorite days. They made their like best profits for the year in times of extreme volatility. And that's because they didn't really they were kind of agnostic about, they didn't take big positions betting it was going to go up or down. They were just kind of there in the middle, trading in and out. And so that's one reason why I think that like the Goliaths are actually quite happy about this. And I obviously don't know for sure, but my prediction is that we will see huge profits for the really big banks in the first quarter when they finally report their earnings. So that's one reason. Another reason is, so this whole narrative, right? So what's happening? We have a bunch of people on a subreddit. We have a bunch of people using Robinhood. They seem to have successfully blown up at least a few hedge funds. So one of the hedge funds that they blew up basically just got bought on the cheap by another hedge fund. And the hedge fund that bought it on the cheap, so Melvin Capital is the one that blew up. Mm-hmm. One of the hedge funds that bought Melvin Capital on the cheap was, or at least rescued them, I don't know if they own the whole thing, but they rescued them and they have some ownership now, is Citadel. Citadel makes money off of Robinhood's order flow. And so there's basically, the shortest way to explain it is there are a ton of really big Wall Street players that I suspect are very, very happy about all of this. That doesn't mean there aren't hedge funds blowing up, but I think that there are other hedge funds quite happy to see those hedge funds blow up because they were competing in the first place. And so that's why I don't really see this as David versus Goliath. I see it as Goliath versus Goliath with David as a distraction.
It's so interesting in a way, like you can't paint a better kind of evil character than these people that are truly predators. And as you say, they're agnostic. They don't have any ideology other than making more money, right? So, like, how can this go on? How can it be? How are these things even legal, really, where you're betting on a company's failure, or you're in some way even impacting that so that they are further down the road towards failure? How is that even legal in capitalism?
Well, there's a lot of debate about what actually constitutes market manipulation. Market manipulation is not legal. I will say that it's been very lightly enforced in the past. And, I think that it's one of those things where the regulators have had a hard time identifying when it's happening. And part of the reason for that is because Wall Street has this structural advantage where not all of their data is public. One of the things I think that's also being missed in this story is we're only talking about all the trading that happens on the exchanges, but Wall Street has the ability to trade off of exchanges on what are called the over-the-counter markets that retail and Robinhood and Reddit people have no access to whatsoever. But it's kind of a parallel marketplace. And they also have access to these things called dark pools, which is where they go when they want to hide their orders and they don't want other people to see them. They like send them to these dark pools. And so I
all of
think
which is legal.
all of which is legal as of now. But I think it's hard for the regulators to get a full picture. I mean, they do have more, ideas about what's happening over the counter than they did in 2008. That was some of the reforms that came about during the last financial crisis. But I think it's hard to sort of identify market manipulation, period, at least historically for the regulators. I do think we're going to see a lot of scrutiny right now. The kind of thing that I worry about is seeing a repeat of 2008. I don't know if folks remember, there were no banks that were prosecuted in the wake of 2008, except one bank that was this tiny bank out of Manhattan, out of Chinatown, called Abacus.
Right? That's right.
That's right. And it was Cy Vance, the Manhattan district attorney,
thank God we got them. Thank God.
Abacus, CEOs in handcuffs. And they were eventually, I think, cleared, right, of the charges. And I worry about that. I worry about a repeat of that. After all this GameStop stuff, I think that what the regulators need to do is look at what are the hedge funds doing? Were they also helping to drive the price of GameStop up? I don't actually think it was just Reddit and just Robinhood. I think that a lot of institutional players saw that because the Reddit people were putting it on the internet, right? And that's the other wrinkle here. Wall Street hides their information, pays a lot of money to try and figure out what other people's positions are. And then you have all tens of thousands of people posting their position on Reddit for free and being very loud about it. That's like a thing Wall Street dreams about, right? So I suspect you have a lot of hedge funds and other Wall Street firms that may be pushing the stock up even more. And I worry that the regulators won't look at those big players. They may look at smaller players, just like they did in 2008.
They'll look for the abacus. That's not right. They'll look for the abacus in this particular scenario.
Right.
Now, how can it be that Robinhood is this app that kind of tries to democratize trading and getting involved in the stock market? There's no fees, no commissions, this kind of thing. But you wrote an article that kind of detailed what in fact is going on with that, that it's not just this kind of altruistic desire to get people involved in the market.
Right. So the easiest way I think about this is it's like Facebook, right? Why is Facebook free? Facebook is free because you're the product. Facebook is selling you ads serving you ads, right? Looking at what you are doing on Facebook in order to customize ads to you. Robinhood is free for a similar reason. You are the product. Your orders, in fact, are the product. So when you buy and sell on Robinhood, Robinhood is not executing those orders for you on an exchange. They sell your order flow to a hedge fund. And the hedge fund that they sell it to happens to be Citadel, who we talked about before. Wow. Yeah. Citadel is a big company. They have what's called a market maker. Those are the people that sit in the middle. So the Citadel's market maker is who Robinhood sells their customers' order flow to. I should say that's also legal. Other brokerages do it. In the Obama administration, they asked the question about whether or not that should be legal because they were worried that that kind of made it confusing about what the true cost of buying and selling is. Because if you sell your customers' orders to a market maker, they're supposed to make sure that they execute your order in a timely way and get you a good price. But the concern is that the brokerage is selling to the highest bidder, right? Selling not to the person that's going to get your client the best execution is the technical term, but selling to the people that pay the most. And Robinhood actually got in trouble a month ago by the SEC for failing to give their customers best execution and failing to disclose properly that they were selling their orders to companies like Citadel. The enforcement action happened a month ago. It covered a period of time farther in the past. But the short answer is,
was it a significant amount or more of a slap on the wrist kind of thing?
I think it was a slap on the wrist. I mean, it was something like $60 or $65 million fine. Robinhood didn't have to admit or deny any guilt. And the SEC found that even when you take into account the fact that Robinhood is free, the fact the orders were being executed in a sort of unoptimal way and costing Robinhood clients $34 million like total. And again, this was a time period from, I believe, 2015 to 2018. And that was before Robinhood got as popular as it is now. So I think, hopefully the regulators will look at that, but I hope they look at more than just that, right? I hope they also look at what's going on with these even bigger players than Robinhood, because, part of the problem is we don't even have that much insight into what hedge funds do because they kind of operate in this sort of regulatory gap right now.
Now, having been on the inside, doesn't it? I mean, to me, I'm just flummoxed constantly. I'm in the arts, so it's an entirely different world. We don't have the same ideology or the same worldview, really. But I'm constantly flummoxed that, as you alluded to with the crash, right? These banks caused a crash. We essentially know why. Not only is there no punishment, but they get bigger and they continue to reap bigger and bigger profits. Now, again, with this, throughout the pandemic, even, right? Like, that's constantly what you've been hearing is record profits for billionaires and, these companies that are just increasingly making record profits. So, like, what can be done? Is it legislation? Is it like what? I mean, the things that are put in place don't seem to have any teeth, and it is a slap in the wrist. Like, is this kind of beyond repair?
I don't think so. I think it always comes down to power and how do we break up concentrations of power. And it's true for Wall Street. I think it's true for big tech, right? I think there's a lot of people working on great antitrust ideas about Facebook and Google and Amazon, who've all gotten bigger since the pandemic, right? I think Amazon in particular. And there's so many different ways that we could do that, right? But I think one of the ways that, just to throw some ideas out, right? A financial transaction tax. One of the ways that, so just to kind of go back to what we were talking about before, why is it profitable for Citadel to buy Robinhood's orders? It's because Citadel has these really sophisticated computer algorithms that trade incredibly fast in like the microsecond level speed. And Robinhood trades tend to be small, so Citadel will like kind of group them together, use their super fast high frequency trading algorithm to trade in front of it and then match the order. And they're making teeny tiny amounts, but because they're doing it so fast and so many times, it's like, a restaurant in Manhattan, you make money off of like the volume of people. Well, this is all pre-pandemic, right? But pre-pandemic, it's like a volume business. If there was a financial transaction tax that was sort of, aimed at these larger institutions, they wouldn't be able to do these kind of high frequency trading. And I think you would see less churn in the market, less volatility, less speculation. So that's just one idea. But I also think we just need to think really big, right? How do we actually make people less beholden to Wall Street, right? Because I think part of the reason this narrative is so sexy and like alluring right now is people need money. The government has not gotten us sufficient relief, right? We had the $1,200 in the spring and the $600, in December, but like people are on the cusp of eviction, people owe all this back rent. And so of course people are gonna be like, oh great, maybe I can beat Wall Street at its own game and, throw $400 in here and maybe double my money. It's alluring, right? But like, that's not a good way. That's like trying to beat Wall Street at its own game is really hard to do and generally not going to be possible long term. And a lot of people are going to buy at the top and then it's going to tank and they're going to get really hurt. And so what I think we need to do is just build pressure to do the kind of thing we did last spring, where, for the first time ever, we really had the government giving out cash to people and proving this point that I think advocates have been saying for so long, which is the solution to poverty is to give people money. And now we have all this evidence that, wow, it actually worked, right? Like people's lives changed in the months after that. So, I think continuing to push for stimulus payments or relief payments or whatever we're calling them, things like canceling student debt, which is something the government can do without Congress. Like Joe Biden could do it tomorrow. He could sign a piece of paper. Well, not he, but the Secretary of Education could sign a piece of paper tomorrow and do it. And student debt is it's just a particularly practical tool because the government actually owns 4 out of every $5 of student debt is held by the government.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty unusual. That's not typical for consumer debt. So just basically, like, to the extent that the government can use the tools it already has, like, forget about Congress, right? Congress is sort of like, I mean, we'll do what we can with Congress, but it's like kind of in a stalemate right now. There's a lot of creative things that the government could be doing to like benefit the lives of individual people. And I think that, right, when you can relieve debt burdens of ordinary people, they're going to be less likely to want to give all their money to Wall Street on the hope that like another GameStop happens. And so I think it's not just any one thing, it's all of these combinations of things, but the sort of theme running through it is how do we increase the people power and reduce the, Wall Street and big corporate power?
Yeah, and to me, I've been thinking more and more, and I'm sure a lot of people have, the conditions are so similar to the conditions that gave birth to Occupy Wall Street and then really a decade of movements. So I feel as though, as one of the themes of Occupy Wall Street so clearly and beautifully stated, all our grievances are connected. And I think the connective tissue is this predatory capitalism, whether it's student loans or, medical debt or, anyone where they, some sort of tragedy befalls them, they can be thrown into bankruptcy because of medical debt, because of, losing their home, their mortgage. And now the pandemic, people obviously losing their lives and as you said, losing jobs and pensions and all this type of stuff. I just say to myself, like, how much longer can this continue? And meanwhile, Wall Street is essentially profiting off of that, right? And big pharma, and they're betting on those things happening, if not making sure that they do happen.
That's right. And I think that's why we really need like big, bold policy changes right now, because otherwise we are just going to have an acceleration of what we've already seen, right? The biggest companies getting bigger, pushing out small business, restaurants going belly up. And I think we have a sort of short moment in time really where, and I don't think it's going to be easy, right? I don't think our policymakers, I think some of them are like, yes, let's do it. And I think others are a little more hesitant, right? But I do think we have a moment here, like the pandemic. Usually the right takes advantage of crises, right? This is the whole shock doctrine idea, right? Like in a time of emergency, like let's raid the public and like build up a private, power structures. But I do think there's a chance here to try to reverse that a bit. And I don't think it will be easy, but I am optimistic about the next few months. I do think we have an opportunity. I just think it's going to take a lot of pressure.
Yeah, hopefully that's coming because it just needs to be more humane in so many different ways. I just have to quickly shift gears, something you touched on in your article. As a Mets fan, I was struck by both the outgoing and the incoming ownerships of the Mets were both mentioned in your articles for being involved in Wall Street corruption. The Wilpons with Bernie Madoff. And now, the new owner, Steve Cohen, who fans have greeted with euphoria because, let's face it, fan bases only care about one thing, that they're spending money. And this guy is doing that. But please talk a little bit about his involvement before, and break my heart as a Mets fan, because I try to like pull away from sports anyway. So maybe this will give me more reason to not pay attention.
Well, that's my role. I'm the skunk at the garden party. But so Steve Cohen used to run a hedge fund called SAC, which pled guilty to insider trading in 2013 and had to shut down. But of course, Steve Cohen himself did not have to admit to anything. So he reinvented himself with this new fund called Point 72. And Point 72 is one of the buyers of the now, blown up Melvin Capital, which is one of the hedge funds that was shorting GameStop.
So Steve Cohen's new hedge fund swooped in and bought up the hedge fund Melvin that the Redditors blew up.
That's right. So, and I also learned this week that I guess Steve Cohen tried to be on Twitter for a minute and had some bad takes and was dunked on real bad and then deleted his account.
Yes.
Which is the kind of perhaps small victories that people can look at and feel good about. But, and then there's a Bernie Madoff connection too, because that thing I was talking about before, the technical term is payment for order flow, but this idea that Robinhood can sell its orders to Citadel, believe it or not, that's an idea that Bernie Madoff came up with back in the 80s.
Wow. Wow.
So I don't know if that's an indication of if it's a good idea or not. Some people think we shouldn't allow it. The SEC asked that question in the Obama administration. But anyway, so yes, you are right. There are two touch points for Mets fans in this scandal.
Yeah, it's becoming harder and harder, which might be a good thing to be a Mets fan. I just wanted to ask you about this concept of shorting just in and of itself. As I understand it, you're not even buying something. You're borrowing stock that you then sell to someone else in the hopes that it goes down. Is that the idea?
That's right. Yeah. So say I borrow 100 shares of something from you, Ted. Say you have 100 shares of whatever, I don't know what, Coca-Cola. I immediately sell it. So now I have a pool of money. So I'm hoping it'll go down. And maybe Coca-Cola.
Can I just ask, what's my motivation for allowing you to borrow my shares? Like I no longer have them. I've lent them.
Right. No, it's a good question. So I pay you interest
for
the right to borrow it. So it's kind of like a loan, but it's a loan in stocks. And so I pay you some interest. I sell it right away, and then I wait for it to go down. And then the idea is I buy it at a lower price. I give you back your shares. I give you your interest, and I pocket the change. The problem is if I sell it, well, you have to sell it right away, right? That's how it works. But you sell it right away. Let's say Coca-Cola goes up and up and up and up. Now I'm in trouble, right? And I can just sweat it out and hope and pray that it goes back down. But you loaned me those shares, and now you're worried I'm going to go bankrupt. So now you get to tell me, hey, Alexis, you need to put up some cash because I don't think I'm going to get my Coca-Cola shares back. And that's what people might have heard people talking about, a margin call. That's the technical term for it. But basically, you're trying to make sure that I don't blow up and you never get your shares back. And so that has been what has been happening to these hedge funds. And the sort of weird thing is when the hedge funds do buy the shares back to close their position, now you have even more people buying the stock, right? Which puts even more upward pressure on the stock. So it kind of creates this weird cyclical effect.
Last question, and it's of a personal nature. Do you ever get any kind of blowback of being a turncoat? Like you were in the cult of Wall Street, and then you went out and joined Occupy Wall Street and all this stuff. Like, how dare you? Or once you're out, they don't even really care.
I've really the folks that I do still talk to think what I'm doing is great. I don't really think the thing about Wall Street is nobody has any nobody romanticizes it. Nobody's like, oh, yeah. Well, except the lobbyists, right? The lobbyists that come to DC are like, yes, we are building the world's most liquid and beautiful financial markets. But the people on there are like, no, I'm just trying to make money. And if I can stab you in the face and, you don't dodge, it's your fault. And I was faster and I win. And it's very so I don't think, no one really gives me a hard time about it. But, and some people think it's really cool. But I will say that, I don't really think that, I don't know. I think if anything, I'm a little bit more worried about like the Reddit people being worried about us talking about Robinhood or something, right?
Right.
That's sort of like the internet hornet's nest moves along and gets bored easily, but
Right.
you
You're
don't
supposed to be
want to
on.
be the
We're the little guy. Didn't you get the memo? Yeah. Well, Alexis, thank you so much for making time, not once, but twice. I really appreciate it. And as I've told you before, I really respect you and appreciate your perspective. So thank you for coming back on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, Ted. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Alexis Goldstein, everybody. Man, she saved me not just for this show, but she truly might have saved my life, because I was so crestfallen and despondent when I realized that I had not pressed record. But now I'm looking right in the corner. It says recording. It says it right there. I looked throughout the interview, and there it is. So we did record. This is being recorded. Let's face it, probably most things we do are recorded, but on Zoom, you do have to press record in order for that to happen. So thank you again, Alexis Goldstein. I encourage you to follow her on Twitter and read everything that she's putting out, because she always has an interesting take that is not just the quick take, the mainstream take. She kind of goes deeper, and having been in the belly of the beast, having worked on Wall Street, she always has very interesting perspective to contribute. So thank you, Alexis Goldstein. All right, my friends, it is time now for perhaps our most popular segment. It's getting a lot of heat in the industry, but more importantly, on the streets. And that segment is, of course, your questions, my answers. Or do we call it, you've got questions, I've got answers? I think I like that better. Whatever you call it, it involves questions and answers, and you certainly brought the heat. You came with the questions, and I will supply the answers. You can count on that. All right, my friends, the first question comes from Ira Weissman on Instagram, who asks, do you wash plastic cutlery? Thank you for your question, Ira. Of course, you're referencing my iconic bit about, do we keep the forks? Or as I pronounced it back then, the forks. Are we keeping the forks? My wife makes fun of me that I can no longer replicate my Queen's accent from the early to mid 90s. But your question was, do we in fact keep them? We had plastic forks for my birthday just recently, and we did not keep them. We threw them out. We, of course, recycled, Ira, but we did not wash the plastic cutlery. I think that's becoming less and less popular now that you can recycle. Just recycle, throw them out, clean conscience, even though it's probably going to a landfill somewhere and killing maybe an endangered fish or aquatic life form. But, that's not to be considered now. That's in your next life. Thank you, Ira. Next question, also from Instagram, KBB asks, what is your spirit animal? KBB, I'm not really much of an animal guy, but spirit animal is an entirely different realm, and I get that. So for me, something with flight, I suppose. There's a family of blue jays or bluebirds. Are they the same thing? Again, I'm lacking in my animal knowledge, but there's a family of a dozen, maybe a baker's dozen of bluebirds that come to our property. The previous owners left, among other things, a bag of bird seed, bird feed. So my son and I go out and we feed the birds And very often among those birds are this family. I call them a family. Maybe they're just a gang. Maybe they're more imposing than I'm giving them credit for. But they all wear the same colors. They're all dressed in blue. So I would say I'm feeling a bluebird. My spirit my spirit animal is a bluebird. If for no other reason than I happen to know a bunch in the area. Thank you for your question. Did you get that town dump sticker yet? This is from a friend in the area actually who tipped us off. Jacqueline, thank you for your question. No. And I'm going to count on you to continue pressuring us because we want that sticker not only so we have access to the town dump for our larger items, but also because I want it for the story. I want to have a sticker that says I belong to a town dump. So yes, please continue to pressure us. A little peer pressure can be a good thing. Measles1 asks, it seems like a double question from Measles1. Can I have your beard? I think the answer is clear. No, you cannot have my beard. You can have probably some approximation. This took 52 years. I mean, I wish you well, Measles1. Follow-up question, if you give me your beard, I'll give you my hair. Whoa. Now we may have a deal. No, I'm happy with where I'm at. I've never been one to, A, dwell on my looks too much, or B, make trades for hair or beard. Though it is a generous offer, and I considered it for a moment. I'm happy with the way I look. I'm married. My wife seems pleased, and she certainly won't hold back if she finds anything lacking. So thank you, Measles, for your question. Are the hedge funds shorting your beard? Asks Jonathan Yeager. That would be their mistake. Clearly. That seemed like the right thing to say. I don't know anything. I don't know how much more clear I can make that. My facility with finance and economics and jargon all therein is lacking. But I think I can still confidently deliver a punchline that makes it seem as though I know what I'm talking about. Danny Sackhoff asks, what do you think about science? Believer? Danny, an excellent question, especially these days. I consider myself in the believer camp. Yes, squarely. Again, much like finance, I know very little about science, but I'm a big believer, as opposed to the realm of finance. I'm a big believer in science. Like any religion, it should be taken with a grain of salt and ultimately make up your own mind. But if the evidence is overwhelming, don't be an ass, is what I always say. Thank you for your question. Let's see here. We have time for a few more. Fuji to Apple asks, when can I make some cover art for you? Please. Fuji to Apple, I encourage the Tea Hive to get buzzing. We've got to let the masses know. And when I say masses, I mean, let's keep this reasonable, all right? I don't want everybody knowing about this show. I don't want everybody. When they say everybody's talking about, I don't want that. I want the right people. And Fuji to Apple, you seem like the right kind of people. So, yes, whatever you can do, we're enlisting all walks. Artists, people from the science world, even from finance, a certain number. If they want to take it down from the inside, that type are welcome to the Tea Hive and to help spread the word about the Ted Alexandro show. So yes, please, Fuji to Apple, DM me, message me, however you can get through. You submitted this through Instagram, so let's do this. Become a member of the Thive. S. Goggerty, have you been back to your homeland of Caucasia to do the dance of your people? Well, thank you for your question, S. Goggerty. The travel restrictions being what they are during COVID, I have not been back to Caucasia in far too long, to be blunt. I still do the dance of my people. And you, of course, are referencing a bit from, I believe it was my first. I mean, where did the years go? My first Comedy Central Presents, late 90s. Am I in the ballpark? And the Caucasian American bit. I was ahead of my time. So yes, I have not been able to return. I will book a flight as soon as it is prudent to do so. Thank you for your question. And we will wrap with let's see. I want to make sure I see. Do you find it weird the amount of comedians moving to Austin just because Joe Rogan did? No, I don't. I believe I answered this on Instagram stories, but I'll go a little more in depth. Joe Rogan, of course, the king of the podcast. I mean, this guy, you've got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, who could have mapped out a career path where you do, what was it, news radio? He's on a hit sitcom as a supporting player for, what was it, 5 years, 8 years? You know, a funny show, good show. He's a regular. From that, goes on to Fear Factor, right? Like, I mean, who would have advised that? Like, yeah, that's a good idea. Host a show where people are eating bugs and jumping into, dog shit or whatever. I don't even know what they did on that show. But he did it, got paid. God bless, and that show, and I think he became an executive producer. Once you get a piece of the show, then you're talking real money. So, and then of course MMA, right? Again, like this is not like a calculate. That's I like people who find their lane in a way that clearly is not calculated. They didn't run it by a focus group or whatever. Like he just did what he thought was next and what he loved. And clearly MMA, with his background in martial arts, his knowledge of that world, he was a perfect fit for becoming an announcer. I think he got a piece of that too financially. He got in on the ground floor. Who knew that would blow up? I still don't know anything about it. It's a little violent for my taste. But apparently a lot of people like that kind of thing. So, yeah. So then Joe did that. I mean, very funny comedian on top of it. And of course, his podcast, right? He was among the first to have a podcast, and the guy is rolling along and rolling in the dough. I think Spotify just gave him $100 million or something like that. So that is why a lot of comedians are moving there. Proximity to the Rogan orbit, That guy can make careers. Like, the way Johnny Carson used to make careers? Joe Rogan can now make careers. He's not going to make everyone who moves to Austin because they think Joe Rogan is going to have him on the show or whatever in some way prop them up. A lot of them will be in for a rude awakening. But Austin's a fun city, That's a fun place to not reach your dreams. If that's going to be the next stop, if they're going from LA, probably a lot of them are moving from LA, maybe New York. Get out. Those cities are dead anyway. LA, California's going to fall off the map within the next decade. New York's pretty much dead. Yeah, follow Rogan around. It's like the Grateful Dead or something, or Fish. Just wherever Rogan goes, you could do a lot worse. Do I find it weird though? Yes, I do. The answer is yes, I do. I always, if you're a comedian, I started out by talking about Rogan. He did what he wanted to do, like he found his path. So find yours. Don't follow Rogan around. But, who am I to say? I just think, I I think ideally you should figure out your own thing. All right, friends. Of course, I'm doing a podcast now too, and I'll probably be next to move. I'm going to look into flights to Austin, although I'm perfectly content, by the way, in an undisclosed location in the northeast of these United States. So it's not like I'm looking to move, or certainly not looking to follow Joe Rogan around. I respect him. I respect his career. God bless. Do what you've got to do. If people want to follow him, a lot of you have your upper echelon of any field, right? No matter what it is. Choose your field. Let's talk comedy for a second. But your upper comedians, and I'm talking the ones that are legit good, not the ones that are media made or pushed by their agency or their management. I'm not talking about the ones that the industry just rocket launches because it's whatever, the right time, right place for whatever flavor of the month. I'm talking about people that are universally respected. You have that tier. Then you have a lot of people who are just trying to figure it out. So if you're in that group, yeah, just follow Joe Rogan around. If you can get lucky enough to kind of draft on his fumes, do it. I can't help but think if the Ted Alexandro show gets popular enough, there are going to be a lot of people moving to an undisclosed location in the northeast of these United States of America. Hey, do what you got to do, but don't come to me looking for a sticker for the town dump, because that is a coveted item, and I will not be sharing that. All right, my friends, that is our show for today, and what a show it has been. Our thanks again, our deepest thanks to return guest, first-time guest. How can both things be true? They are. Alexis Goldstein, thank you for gracing us with your presence. And luckily, I hit record the second time. And we thank our executive producer extraordinaire. She rules with an iron fist, but increasingly with a heart of gold and that third eye squeegeed clean at all times. Madeline Geraldine, I love you. We thank the maestro who provides the bed of music upon which we lay. He is, of course, Pro DLC. And though we do not thank him this week, we give a shout out because, you have to ease the pain of a separation. We give a shout out to our former producer extraordinaire, Matthew L. Weiss.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, we encourage all of you to subscribe, hit the notifications, jump into the comments, like this video. What are you waiting for? And if you wish to support the show, you may do so with my blessing if you are willing and able. I am not coercing you. But if you are willing and able, go to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. Plenty of bonus content, bonus episodes, early access to the Ted Alexandro Show episodes, and of course, the Ted Alexandro Comedy Academy. 10 classes and counting. I believe number 11 is coming this week. We are just finishing up the editing on that one. So that will be coming to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. Thank you again, friends. Be well, and always sell short and keep your feet on the ground.